Welcome to The Chat. Come behind the inbound scenes of some of the world's fastest growing companies. For the past 10 years as Chatmetrics, we've had an exclusive inside view of how these industry leaders are revolutionising inbound marketing and sales across diverse sectors. Each week, we bring you conversations with top minds in marketing and sales who share insider secrets and strategies for driving inbound success. Join us on The Chat, your front row seat to the future of inbound. Welcome back to The Chat. Today, I'm thrilled to have a very special guest, Juliana Pereira, a powerhouse in growth marketing and revenue operations. Juliana has built a stellar career leading marketing efforts, optimizing revenue systems, and scaling businesses with data-driven precision. She's worked with some of the most innovative teams in the industry, not to mention a shift from a business to customer to business to business. And today we're going to unpack her expertise in demand generation, RevOps, and the future of B2B growth strategies. Juliana, welcome to The Chat. I'm excited to have you here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Terry. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'd really like to jump straight in. Your background, your expertise really started in B2C, in e-commerce type businesses and consumer brands, and you've shifted to B2B. I'm fascinated to learn about what you've seen now with your B2C insights, what you've been able to bring to B2B, what the differences are, and what B2B can learn. But what made the shift in the first place? Why did you move?
That's a great question. So yes, I did start my career in e-commerce, mostly in retail, but yes, very B2C driven. And throughout my career, I was in the beginning mainly managing e-commerce or B2C revenue channels at companies where maybe that wasn't the primary focus, but it was a really important revenue channel. So I was embedded within a larger ecosystem of not just marketing, but also business. And so I think that already kind of helped broaden my thinking, kind of having access to a lot of different departments and working with a lot of different people in different functions and very cross-functionally. Also, before I jumped over to B2B SaaS, like on the tech side and services side, I actually had a little stop in between. I worked at a fashion company and Ralph Lauren, and I was there and I was actually working in a B2B marketing team. And so that was kind of, even though it was a B2C brand, I was on a B2B team where I was working with their wholesale partners.
Interesting.
To sell the Ralph Lauren products. So it was a little bit of a shift over already. And I didn't think about that at the time. But now when I look back at my career, I think, oh, that was kind of interesting that I started making that shift already on the B2C type business side of the house. But actually, I was very lucky to make the jump to B2B. I was hired into SmartLang, a B2B SaaS company, translation management and translation services company. And the VP there had made a similar shift from a consumer brand over to B2B SaaS. And so when he met me, he said, I made this jump and I think that you're smart and you're sharp and you'll be able to do it too. And so he kind of took a chance on me, which I was very excited about. But he asked me the same questions, like, how do you think B2C tactics can translate into B2B? And I said, well, the way I see it working on e-commerce sites and direct consumer, the funnel is a mile wide and an inch deep, but in B2B SaaS, it's an inch wide and a mile deep, right? And so how are you kind of inverting those tactics? So I found that in e-commerce, in that B2C side, it's so transactional that you're getting so much data so quickly because people are buying things or seeing the activity on your site immediately. So you can shift gears very quickly and you can test things faster. On B2B, it's a little bit different because you have this whole handoff between marketing, sales, and all these people kind of involved to really pull those businesses to the finish line for these larger deals. So, there's a lot of thought around how do we apply some of those tactics and marketing strategies to be more transactional and accelerate those deals. And there's some different ways to do that, but mostly a lot of it is testing and thinking about, how can we make it more transactional? right? And that's kind of the ultimate goal, to accelerate that. So you can turn a 9-month sales cycle into a 3-month or 1-month sales cycle.
And
So
and Chris Walker often talks about this problem with attribution and trying to find, where is the starting point? And last touch often can be quite deadly in the basis that last touch
mm,
might be an inbound SDR when it was actually, through
yeah,
social circles and brand awareness is where the lead, the
yeah.
prospect potentially really generated from. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's really hard in B2B, but we were already struggling with that on the B2C side. There was a lot of double counting, because you would have someone who would search for a red sweater online, click on an ad, but then they would, click on some other, they would read, I don't know, travel magazine, and they'd see the sweater featured in there, and then they click on that. And, so you would get that double counting a bit as well. But again, you'd see the data very quickly. And you'd get a lot of it. So you could kind of build out attribution models faster to some degree. But when you're scaling at a B2B company where you don't have quite as many leads or activity happening in that way, because it's a longer sales cycle, it is really challenging. So I'm actually working with a company right now that's exactly the big question: is how do we keep marketing and sales from having friction, where then, does sales get the credit? Does marketing get the credit? And so my ethos on that is that it shouldn't matter. Marketing and sales it should actually be one team, and with the same numbers. MQLs matter, but to be honest, that to me is more of a performance metric than it is like a very firm KPI that the leadership team needs to be looking at every week. The ones that matter more to me, at a leadership level or at a more senior level, is meetings and the pipeline
Yeah.
generated, the number of opportunities, how many qualified meetings are happening. Because if qualified meetings are happening, that means a salesperson said this is worth having the meeting. And then the opportunity, obviously, we know that means that this is a viable potential client, right? And then, of course, close deals once it gets further down the funnel. So, in that sense, I promise I'm getting to the
No,
point.
no, no. I'm fascinated.
But the yeah, so with that, it helps alleviate a lot of the challenges, because then you're not fighting between marketing and sales saying that the lead originated with me. What you're doing is now looking at the meetings that happen and look back and say, okay, so this might have originated on a PPC ad, but because the SDR followed up when they looked at the website and saw that that contact came through the site or whatever, they followed up, they were able to bring that person actually to take the meeting. The person might have just come to the site and poked around. They didn't fill out a form, but then the SDR is following up with people from that company. They get in touch with them and they get them on a meeting. Like, marketing should, obviously, that's the lead source is marketing, but the sales team should absolutely get credit for that too. And so you have to have the reporting around lead source, where they first find out about you, and then all the different campaigns or activities that influence that. Now, building out attribution models is challenging. If you're not operating at scale, then you don't have enough data to really make assumptions, and then, or to be able to make data driven decisions on how you're going to build the attribution model, and you're kind of just guessing. Um, and so that's why, like, you have to reach a certain scale to really build out a meaningful attribution model, in my view.
No, so if you can't, the aim of attribution is to determine what's working and what's not working from a marketing
Yes, correct.
perspective, where you're going to shift your investment to. You need
Right.
scale for attribution to work. You need to have a
Yeah.
large enough chunk of data to actually look at that and say, okay, this is viable
Yeah.
information. What if you didn't have that? What
Yeah.
if you were with a startup that didn't have that volume of inbound leads to be able to
Mm.
come in and look at it? Where would you start? What would be the place that you would start at?
Yeah. So I mean, I build it out, the lead sources, in a few buckets. So you have the unpaid lead sources, the paid lead sources, the prospecting lead sources. And then usually there's like referrals, and then a partner one,
Hmm.
like channel partners and whatnot. And referrals are typically, anything from like investor referrals, employee referrals, customer referrals, like anything in your ecosystem that's sending someone over to you. So I break those down. Like, I have categories in a way that I break that down. And Yeah, I mean, it's about tracking all of those activities. So I do track every single activity that influences the lead, right? Or the deal. The challenge is you don't want to just look at the first touch or the last touch. You need to see all those pieces in the middle, but the challenge is saying, "Oh, well, 20% of this, should go to social media for whatever reason, or 30% to this." It's like I don't break out those pieces, but what I do look at that point is balancing volume from the different campaigns. So I break out all the campaigns and activities and look at uh, how many opportunities they
Mm-hmm.
influenced. So then there you can start making more directional decisions, saying, "Wow, this is really interesting. We have our highest value opportunities, let's say, are coming from channel A." And maybe there's only 3 or 4 of them that were influenced by channel A, but we're seeing that channel C, we have almost every opportunity is influenced by those. But they're all the smaller deals, like several of the smaller deals. So then you kind of think about like, okay, so what's the CAC on that? Let's start building out some models, right? And calculating that. So maybe the ones that were impacting the bigger deals were events. That makes sense because you're meeting people there.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on the event, you might be talking to someone who's, very visible or whatnot, like bigger clients you're meeting there. So that makes sense. And so then you can easily find out which events are working and which aren't. That's pretty quick and dirty. But for the smaller deals, you can start digging in to see inbounds, like which ones are organic search, which ones are paid. How is that playing together? Are there leads that are influenced by both? Like where someone is searching, multiple people on the company are searching in both channels. So they're kind of playing nicely together and what that looks like. So, not to get too granular, but you have to kind of dig into those performance metrics for each of those channels and just think really critically, looking at the size of the deal, the number of deals, the pipeline, and what's dropping out of the pipeline. I love to see what drops out of my pipeline because if it's like all this great channel is generating a ton of opportunities, but none of them turn into customers, then
What's the
we're gonna have
focus?
to rethink that strategy. Something's happening.
Mm,
Something's going on there that's a little bizarre. So
absolutely.
I hope that answered the
Oh,
question.
100%. And look, I think from your earlier comment about, MQL's okay, but you're really looking at the SQL or sales accepted lead. You mean
Yeah.
that's in my mind, when we talk about the engine, which is what this is, it's a factory. It's just like any other factory. You're
Yeah.
starting with nothing, you're creating awareness,
That's
getting
right.
attention, interest, bring it through into the sales funnel where you're trying to get it to a point they make a decision and fall out the other end as a customer.
That's
Fall's
right.
probably not the right word, but on the conveyor belt,
Yeah.
they end up as
Yeah,
a
on the
paying
conveyor belt.
customer. But the
Right.
challenge for B2B, and I've seen that even with our own clients, is that because the sales cycle can be so long from first touch
Yeah.
to close deal, that it's almost like marketers have this sense of, well, we don't really know until the deals are closed, what's necessarily
Yeah.
working all the way through. So it tends to be so slow and cumbersome. Yeah, our B2C customers, they
Yeah.
move at lightning speed compared to it. What I hear you're saying is that you're looking further up the funnel where you can get a better sense. If it's an SQL, you've got an idea roughly that, well, certainly, they are a potential customer, then there's going to be something fall out potentially
Yeah.
through whatever the sales conversion rate is.
Yeah.
But that gives you an earlier indication that you've got an outcome and not just taking the last touch point in consideration, but the entire process that those leads have come through to
Yeah.
understand. I mean, that seems to make sense. I mean,
It has
it's
to.
looking at it as an engine or as a factory as opposed to, you know,
Absolutely. And the thing is, if you're I keep forgetting if I've posted this on LinkedIn or not, but I wrote an article at some point and I think it's sitting in my draft somewhere that pretty much says like all marketing is account-based marketing. Like there's no other type of marketing. If you're just kind of putting marketing out there, it doesn't make sense. Like you have to know exactly who you're going after, at least in B2B. B2C might be different. You're looking at bigger segments and larger swaths of audiences and stuff. But in B2B, it has to be super targeted. You need to know who you're going after. So the way I see it when I work with SDR teams and salespeople is, okay, let's build out these account lists so that we can really tightly coordinate the marketing activities that are supporting the sales effort and vice versa, so that everything is just really in sync. Um, and then it's like any meeting that an SDR, BDR, whatever you call them, whatever you want to call them, AEs, anyone, any meeting that they generate that is with that right person at that right company and the right function, the right seniority, the whole thing, like that to me is a highly qualified, like that is a very strong indicator that
That's
campaign or that channel got to the right
so
person.
that's
So
success.
that so meetings
That's
are
success for marketing, isn't
meaningful.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And so that's why it's like you can already see a lot with the meeting. That it doesn't turn into an opportunity means that there isn't bant. And it means that marketing doesn't know that, sales doesn't know that until they pain funnel, right? That happens on the call. You can't do anything about some of those things.
Correct.
So that's why like as long as, and we would compensate SDRs this way, which is if you get them from this list, or if the company is not on the list for whatever reason, but it's this size and has this criteria and looks like these companies, that counts. Like, even if it doesn't turn into an opportunity, that's really meaningful. And so that guides a lot of the decisions on marketing and what to continue. Because then at that point, it's like, it's a selling challenge. Now, how can we get those people more interested? That's a different type of marketing. So now we can move into the sales acceleration portion of marketing,
Absolutely.
if that makes
Absolutely.
sense. Yeah.
100%. It's one of the challenges we have when we're talking to organizations, through our sales process is that very point about, well, if you're pay per lead, your incentive is to book more leads, then how do we know that it's going to be quality
Yeah,
leads moving through? Well, my offset to
exactly.
that is, well, it's no lock-in contract. So at any point in time, we have to have
Mhm.
100% focus on quality. And when you've got such a tight criteria around the SDRs saying, if they're in this ICP,
Mhm.
if they meet,
Yeah.
or if they're not in this list, they meet this ICP and you can book a meeting, then that's an
Yeah.
outcome. We operate on a very similar. So as you were saying that, I'm sitting there nodding, thinking, I absolutely get this
Yeah.
100%. This resonates. It's the only way we operate with our clients. They have to give us that ICP. And our biggest
Yeah.
job is
That's right.
disqualifying rather than qualifying. Well,
Yeah.
most of our clients have got great
Yeah.
website traffic coming in and there's a lot of visitors coming through.
Mhm.
We handle 70 to 100,000 chats a month. What you do see in
Yeah.
those conversations is that there's a lot of people that have questions to ask that may not be potential clients at all. Many times it's researching or might be students or it's somebody looking for a job.
Right.
They're the
Yeah.
easy ones to disqualify.
That's easy.
The harder ones
Yeah.
are the ones that want the product, they actually want the service. The organization has their ICP and know that this person you're chatting to is not of a scale where it's actually commercially viable for the
Yeah.
organization. And you have those difficult conversations to say, look, you really don't fit as we're not going to be able to solve your problems for you because it doesn't work for us from a commercial perspective. I mean, that's not exactly what you say. There's a whole host of you know,
No, of course there's a
yeah.
script, but that's really interesting data too, because you start seeing that volume, then you can think like, is there a product-led motion? Like kind of a freemium sort of, I mean, depending on the product, I don't know the clients you work with, but I'm assuming it's really across the board and the spectrum. And so that's really interesting in that channel to then, and that's what I love about marketing, um, which is you can uncover a lot of potential revenue channels that weren't there, that are kind of not quick wins necessarily, but could materially actually transform the business by saying like, look, we're seeing this kind of requests coming
Yeah.
in. Like, this is what people are actually looking for. This is informing how we're seeing the market. Maybe there is a smaller segment we don't focus completely on, but that we can find a way to service them. And I did that at one of the companies I worked at where we were looking at like, how do we do a more modularized service? Like, can we give just like one module of our whole SaaS platform, or do we have to sell the whole
Yeah.
thing? Like, maybe there is a play where it's more the land and expand, or another company where they decided to do more transactional. Like, how about we have something more like a freemium play? So yeah, so that's kind of marketing can help inform that too, which is really fun.
We've seen, and so we're mainly in the B2B tech space with
Hmm.
SaaS companies, and what we've seen is
Yeah.
the um, change in offer to adopt and bring on those land and expand. But we've also seen the opposite where they've become firmer and what they've done is adjust their marketing because they're attracting too many of those smaller clients or those non-ICP clients. And so that's
Uh,
helped adjust marketing campaigns. On the flip side, and the other side has been product. Product has been super interested in those conversations because they've been able to see requests for features and those sorts of things as well. So, I mean, And
Yeah.
that's all through marketing feedback, because effectively that's where the live chat comes through, is
Yeah.
from a marketing perspective. Marketing's been able to go back and
That's
say, hey,
right.
you know what, we're getting a lot of requests for these types of features. And so it's fascinating. Have you seen in that type of environment where you've had to shift marketing because there's a larger quantity of non-ICP inbound?
So we shifted our marketing, or did
Oh,
it like
change the
influence the
campaign,
product
or
in some
no, no,
way?
change the campaign. So the product is set
Oh,
to what it is.
yes.
So
I mean,
adjusting campaigns to get the right audience.
I'll be honest, typically before launching a campaign, I'm pretty secure that I've talked to enough people or done enough testing or really checked that the messaging is going to resonate with that audience. Um, but of course you tweak, right? So, I mean, for example, you're talking to an enterprise business, you're talking about, maybe scaling globally or, growing their operations, reducing their costs, things like that. Whereas with a smaller business, your messaging might be more like, go up against the big guys.
Yeah.
Like, here's how you can cut through the noise. Here's how you can be more competitive. So that like naturally, that like what the messaging is going to be depending on your product. Assuming you've done that ICP
Yeah.
work, right? Because then the messaging comes on the heels, come off of that, right? Um, but in terms of, I mean, there's constantly testing. I had that at Flow Commerce, company I was at, really exciting growth. I was there for 3.5 years. I was among the first executives on the funnel on the commercial side. And in 3.5 years, we sold for $500 million, starting at, 1 million in ARR when I arrived.
Wow.
We didn't even have a marketing team, a couple of sales guys. I mean, it was really the Wild West, but super, super exciting. And we had to make the shift, and very deliberately, from more kind of mid-market to enterprise. And so it was the messaging wasn't even the hardest part. It was actually kind of the resourcing for it, which is like, okay, now we need to invest in better tools. We need SDRs. We didn't have SDRs. So we were like, well, if we're going to do this, then we've got to have the engine, like the full engine. And so we brought in salespeople. We brought, so we really kind of built out a more robust team. And I also started hiring on the marketing and product marketing
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
So I think that's, it's a lot of it's in the execution. Um, Not to say that messaging isn't important, it's everything. But I think if you've got your ICP locked up and all of that, and you know who you're going after, the messaging is going to be much easier. And the bigger issue is going to be the execution and what you need to do that effectively.
Well, and to that point, execution, one side of it is the sales process and getting to the end point where you
Hmm.
close a deal. Did you find in that
Yeah.
organization that shifting from and moving into enterprise, that the ongoing management and support was a higher cost? Was there a higher demand from enterprise businesses?
For our
No,
product,
no, a higher demand for
you meant?
support and more immediacy. Like, was there a cost of building? Like, was it different to serve those enterprise customers compared to the mid-market? Where did you come from?
Oh, that's very interesting because of the nature of that. If I understand the question correctly, the nature of that product was really enterprise. It was very complex. It touched on a number of areas in a very a yeah, a complex sort of ecosystem. It was cross-border e-commerce, and there's a lot of things that go into that, from duties and taxes to localizing the website checkout and international shipping. So there's a lot of pieces to that. So when you're working with smaller clients, you have to figure out a way how to do all those complex things, but on a smaller scale. And so it ended up being the challenge a lot of businesses have, where they put a lot of time and effort to get a smaller client up and running, but it's, is it worth the time and effort to do all that? Whereas with enterprise, the deal size is much bigger. You can invest more into, being able to plug and play into those big CMSs, or the big e-commerce platforms, or whatever it might be. Or even to do a custom build for the client, because they're paying a lot more. So it's worth it to put those resources into it. So that was part of the reason that we really wanted to shift to enterprise, was that we were realizing we were doing a lot of work for smaller clients, where there were honestly small point solutions out there that could help them with what they needed. And I actually did a lot of inbound. I loved taking inbound lead calls. I love talking to those folks. And there were so many I would speak to, and I would even work the deals for a while, depending on the size of the company. But I would tell them, listen, I'm not going to say the name of the competitor because I never say a competitor on a call. But I am going to say that I don't think you're ready yet for what we have, because it's just not going to be worth the money or the investment for you. And it's going to be a hard implementation. Like, I think you're maybe start with a point solution, and then let's talk in a year and see where you are. Because if you're scaling quickly, then that'll totally make
Yeah.
sense. So, you kind of have to know when you're going to fire a prospect or a client. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of goes both ways
Absolutely.
to some degree in
Absolutely.
SaaS.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like in that particular business, you were already there. You already had the complexity to manage the enterprise businesses. It was enterprise ready.
We
Yeah.
did. We had some enterprise clients. Our co-founders were had successfully exited other businesses in the past. And one of them was a major retail in the retail
Mhm.
vertical. And so he had connections at some big retailers and stuff. And so we already had some very good marquee clients there. But that's more the friends and family. So it's not, that was pre-demand generation,
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
happening. So we were building for enterprise, but you got to get more customers to get more funding. You know how it is.
Yep.
It's always like cart before the horse. So
Of course. Of
yeah,
course.
we had to take some SMBs in.
Of course. What so the reason I asked that question, I actually had a conversation yesterday with a company, um, 30,000 paying users. So they're not small fish, but most of their customers are the small to lower mid size. They want to move into enterprise, but what they're finding is that
Yeah.
the move to the enterprise, they have to change their internal operations so much to actually support the high demand for support
Mhm.
from enterprise businesses. And
I
so
see.
that was what drove me to ask that question. They're, they've
Yeah.
tried it once, and really backed out of it because they found that the cost of building their their internal capability to support enterprise was outweighing that the enterprise that they were
Yeah.
bringing on. So yeah, they're in a really good place at the moment. They're in a situation where a new CRO, they're bringing in, building out that enterprise team again now. They've learnt from the first round
Right.
the support that's required internally. So they've built all of that in the background.
Yeah.
And that was what I think will allow them to quickly start to step in and grow their enterprise side of the business.
Yeah. You have to start to look like the customer you want. You know how they say, like, dress for the job you want? It's like you have to start looking like the customer you want, like in terms of your scale and how you're operating. So that makes
Yeah,
sense.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Since you've been involved in revenue operations, what's some of the biggest shifts you've seen in the last couple of years?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So revenue operations, I sort of managed it by accident and I love it. And so now I end up getting really deeply involved because it has to do with data, which frankly is the only way you can prove that marketing is doing
Mm.
anything is using data. And data is really challenging, especially because nowadays you can measure almost anything, right? Um, there's just so much data. And I think, 30, 40 years ago, I don't know, data was harder to come by. It was much more broad mass marketing. And so there was just, there weren't as many data points. Now it's so granular that it can be overwhelming because a lot of what you're measuring you might not actually need, and what you're actually looking at might not be telling you, like, it might not actually uncover the right insights. And so there's a lot of challenges there, and RevOps really sits at the middle of that for the whole funnel, but also through to customer success. So I see, revenue operations should be a completely across the entire commercial organization, to be able to bring all those pieces together in operational and of course like financial sense in terms of revenue sense. And so I see really there's three functions within Rev Ops when I think about it at its core. And people can disagree with me on this, but I see it as a matter of technology. I see it as a matter of process and data, right? And so those are to me the three biggest areas that I typically, with a Rev Ops person or someone that's usually in sales ops, where I say, sorry, but I'm going to have to pull you over into marketing ops as well. And you're going to start dealing with all of it. Those are kind of the three areas: is what's the tech stack doing? Like, what are we using? Are they playing nicely together? Do we need to consolidate? There's a lot of tools out there. People like to Frankenstein them
Mhm.
together and then suddenly HubSpot builds this in it, so you might not need this tool anymore, or this one now has this and you don't need, so like, how do we consolidate that and be really efficient and smart about it? Um, then the process part, that's the hardest part because that's the whole handoff we were talking about before. Like
Yep.
someone needs to hold the keys to the little lockbox where all the qualification criteria is locked up, where everyone can say, like, we know this is here. Like, this is what an SQL is. This is what a MQL, whatever it is. Like, someone has to create guardrails around that and gating and be very, very like checking that and pulling reports on that. Like, are these leads being worked? Are these not? What happened? Like, what's going on with this deal here? Like, why did this become a deal and not, like, really digging into those conversion rates and all that stuff. Um, but yeah, that a lot of that is process that plays into that, like making sure that those guardrails are around like the way the teams work together. And then of course, like I mentioned before, the data, there's so much data cleanup. Like right now I'm working with a client where HubSpot, we're not sure that the data is being captured. And I'm not sure what happens to certain leads when they come in. Um, it's so there's constantly the sense of, like trying to figure out like, where is that data? And and the reason why this got uncovered is because I asked for what I thought was a very simple report. I'm a fractional CMO there. So I said, okay, this is easy. I'm going to show this at the leadership team on Monday. Can you pull this report for me? Oh, we can pull some of that. And I said, okay, let's have an hour meeting and dig into why you can only pull in some of that. And then realizing like, okay, this is not set up. The database isn't set up correctly. And the workflows to pull in the data to those spots aren't. So to get to your question, I promise I'll get there, is with RevOps today, I think that it's, having that really delicate balance of those three things. Like oftentimes you don't have one person that really understand. They might get it just for sales ops or marketing ops because those used to be separate functions, but now it has to be all of it. And they have to think horizontally and not just kind of vertically on their own tech stack, like how it's layered. Now it's like how it's layered, but across all these
Mm.
teams. And so I find that RevOps people have to think so much more broadly that way, in terms of the full business and not just on like one piece of it. So like in terms of the tech and the process, same thing. You're looking across the funnel. It's not just, passing from one team to the next. There's a lot more kind of interaction going in between the teams before a lead gets to where it needs to get to or a deal closes. And data cleanup has gotten more complex. I think that there's a lot of AI that is going to support, I mean, every biggest buzzword on the planet right now, right? A lot of AI is going to help clean that up. I'm hoping that there will be more AI built into the tools people are already using that can clean that up and say, hi, we see your data is a mess. It would be great knowing what you're trying to do and seeing what you're trying to build in your workflows is if you just like, let us do it for you. Like, wouldn't it be great if you had that in your CRM,
Ye-
right? And maybe there's a tool out there and I don't know it, in which case, please get in touch with me because that would be so
mm.
fantastic. So I think that there's a lot of AI that's going to be able to support the data side and the process side as well. And but having someone to really understand those mechanics is so key in the
So,
role.
so there's a product
Yeah.
idea for anybody. Build an AI tool that allows you to build a lucid chart workflow, upload it into AI into the tool, and it goes through and builds everything out for you.
There. Exactly. Like, I just want to have a conversation with it for like 20 minutes, explain exactly what I want, and then plug them into the database and say, make this happen. And that's great.
One thing that strikes me, I think there's one word that you've used so much through the conversation so far, and it's complex. And the
Yeah.
complexity in today's B2B marketplace is mind blowing.
Hmm.
I know for ourselves, I mean, we
Yeah.
don't get into anywhere near that level of detail. For us, it's a much simpler play. I see our
Yeah.
clients and I see the multitude of different channels that they've got to deal with to start with. Then you lay across that the multitude of different technologies, stacks they've got to deal with, technology applications.
Yeah.
You layer into that the variation in vendors now, everything from, the days are gone of ringing a newspaper salesperson to send an ad. I
Yeah.
mean, that's all gone. With the digital landscape we're
Mm.
operating in, you've got huge media buying organizations and media platforms that then start to place it. I just wonder how anyone can truly put attribution even to a simple advertising campaign, placing of ads in
Yeah.
front of people on web. we see that there's the early last year, I think it was, the controversy of say Forbes magazine that had a total fake separate website that the Forbes magazine was running all of the ads to, that they were driving, that the ads weren't even
Oh,
appearing
wow.
in
Yeah.
the normal website. So it's like ad fraud, the complexity, the platforms. Now there's even, as you
Mhm.
mentioned, RevOps. RevOps, I know that terminology's been around for a little while, but it's still relatively new, that
Yeah.
concept of bringing it all
It's
together.
relatively new. Yeah.
CROs, Chief Revenue Officers, as opposed to CMOs
Yeah.
and VP sales.
That's right.
Then you're moving into now this whole go-to-market roles that they're starting to come to the fore. It's the
Yeah.
level of,
Chief growth officers, things like that, and chief go to
you
market.
know,
Yeah. I've seen that.
what do you think it is that separates, so in such a complex environment, what do you think it is that separates the best demand gen strategies from the rest?
The best demand gen strategies from the rest. Oh, that's a really interesting question. Um, Let me think about that for a second. Um, hmm. Well, there's definitely at this point, I was talking about ABM before. All marketing is ABM, but definitely there is this skew over to one-on-one sort of marketing, one to few or one to one kind of marketing. I mean, obviously that's really challenging. You can't just go after one account, but the hyper personalization that goes into that is really important. I'll be honest, as a marketer, as I'm sure is the case for you, I get, especially now that I'm a consultant, a little less so, but when I was CMO or SVP of marketing, I get hit up by SDRs all the time. I do read those emails if they have a few characteristics that are very meaningful to me. One, super pithy, just draws me in. They don't talk about their cat or how they, like, a friend of their bestie from high school went to college with me. I don't really care. But I saw one that had a screenshot of like my website. I can't remember what they did, but they simulated like what their product would do on the site. And I was like, yeah, I gotta at least see what this is because this looks at least like there's something. And and I'm sure that they have an automated way, maybe using AI, where they do that. They go to people's site, they generate, they take an instance of it or whatever, and then generate some sort of image, like showing what their product is. Like they probably have a pretty well baked way to do it at scale. But it was very personalized because it was my website, and so I knew exactly what they did just by seeing it. So I think those are some ways to kind of like really cut through the noise, is figure out how can you make it feel as one-on-one and as possible, but you can still operate at scale. So there's some different ways to do that. Definitely like the super engaging, like fun, um, like either web apps or, interactive content. It's really engaging. I started doing quizzes at one of my last jobs. Like the last few jobs I did, I would do quizzes and things like that. It's a great way to gain data from your audience as well. Cause guess what? Now you have a blog post.
Yeah.
Throw up a quiz where people answer a bunch of questions. And then, not only lead gen because they give you your email at the end to see their, score or whatever it might be, but now you have a blog post where you can say, blah, 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 blah. So that's a really interesting thing, and people like to play around with things. I'd like to get a little bit more sassy on the websites I work on, having like more of those kind of slider things where you can see different, um, I don't know, like some cool different sort of thing. Maybe I work in the translation localization industry, for example, or I have in the past. Like, what if you had content that was in English and then you just kind of have a slider that goes over and it's in Spanish, and then you do it again, it's Arabic. I don't know. Like, even if it doesn't really serve a purpose of showing what exactly they do, it sort of gives you that simulation of like, oh, they translate, they know how to deal with languages on a website. So I want to call them so they translate my
Yeah.
website, for my French market or whatever. So I don't know, like, I'm just making this up. I don't know if it's a good idea. I'd have to sit and think about it, but things like that get people to stay on the site. I think that's the big thing. How do you get people to stay on the site these
Yeah.
days,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So,
Look, I'm
yeah.
the same. I think if to get my attention, so frustratingly, I had the opposite experience this morning. When I wake up, one of the first thing I do, we run a 24/7 business. I go through quickly, check the Slack channels, check the
Mm,
emails to make sure that there's
Climb it.
no
Yeah.
disasters happened overnight. Not disasters, but anything that I need to get involved with. There very rarely is, but that's just the way I operate. I like to be on top of things. This morning, it was almost like the first 5 emails in my inbox were just absolute spam. It was an email about
Yeah.
them, and I'm really, I'm very frustrated with it because by now we should all know better. We should all know better. We do email outbound. It's very personalized, it's very relevant. I won't say it's
Yeah.
personalized. We don't talk about high schools and football teams, etc. But it's very relevant to their role, to their position, to the organization they're in. We try and make it as
Mhm.
timely as possible and about them, not about us. And when I see the absolute opposite to that come into my inbox, I get so frustrated. I'm desperately don't
Yeah.
want to hit the spam button because I don't really want to do that to anybody. I don't want people to do that to us, a
Yeah.
karma. But the last couple this morning actually were so bad that I replied and said spam. Like, this is literally spam. Stop doing this.
Yeah.
It was terrible. I've seen some amazing examples as well. One of the things that
Mm.
we made some terrible mistakes early on with our outbound, particularly with
Yeah.
the email. Um, we found that with our ICP, pointing out things that they were doing wrong was not such a good idea. What we started to do was
Right.
point out
Right.
things that their competitors were doing wrong and right, and that got a much better response than,
Oh, that's
yeah,
smart.
yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
But from
That's
a
right. Yeah. You don't want to call their baby ugly.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But from a demand gen, I think it's different depending on the product and the audience and
Right.
the medium that you're using. What's your thoughts on social media? I mean, B2B probably, in saying that, you can just hear me say LinkedIn. What's your thoughts on social media?
Yeah, I mean, it needs to serve a purpose and it needs to be aligned with the goals of the brand across the board. I mean, you're a B2B SaaS brand. Like, the first thing I would ask is like, what are you doing on Instagram if you are on Instagram? I know that seems fun, but okay, if you're using it because you have like your culture is that selling point and like, wow, you guys go bowling every Thursday night and you go on vacations together and you do fine. Okay, cool. You're a really tight knit team. It makes sense that you're on Instagram and you're all following each other, having a good time because that speaks a lot to the culture. But I don't really, it's not one of those things like you shouldn't be on every channel. And I think there's a sense of like, well, people are hanging out in these places. I have to go there. And it's like, but it might not be appropriate or make any sense. And also, if you're not going to update those channels, if you don't have someone to do that, then like, you can't just have them sitting there with the last post being like last November
Yeah.
or like 2 years ago in January. And I've seen that before. I've inherited things like that where I look at it, I was told you have to start a Twitter feed. I'm like, no one's gonna who's gonna update it? Like, I'm gonna update it once a month. Or I guess X. Like, you can't update X once a month. That you need someone who's like really understands the strategy there. So I think that brands do need to think about what's the best for them. There are some B2B brands that play well on Facebook or Instagram. Like, they do have like kind of a fun thing, like, fun things that they can do there, like especially B2B2C
Yep.
brands. That I think that, that's easier because you're kind of ultimately speaking to an end consumer. So you can kind of play back do something playful with that. But yeah, I think for a lot of just pure B2B, that's a bit harder to do. And also, is your audience really looking to be interested, like learn about a B2B SaaS when they're hanging out, like at the end of the day, like scrolling through their feed, looking at photos of their, like the trip that they want to
Yeah.
take or whatever. Um, so that's tricky. LinkedIn ads are great. You can really target and do all sorts of cool things there, which is good, but they are expensive. So that's a big challenge. I haven't had as much time as maybe I should invest more time into this, is really thinking about like, how can you boost organic growth more on LinkedIn? To really kind of, because then that helps obviously with the visibility. And that I think it's obviously more cost effective, especially as the LinkedIn ads get more expensive over time. I did see some different types of ads that they were in beta, I believe, a couple of years ago or a year ago, and I haven't seen many since. But it was one where essentially it was someone It was a boosted post, as I found out later. It was actually sponsored, where they talked about their experience about like kind of what they learned in the product. Like it was something that felt so organic. Um, and it was really just kind of about, I'll have to find my notes on this, but it was really great. I read it and I was like, this is great. Like, what a good post. Like, it got a ton of likes, a ton of followers. And so there are some innovative things there that can be done, but it just has to be really smart and thought out and stuff. Otherwise, it's not a huge ROI driver in the organic side unless you have a bajillion
Yeah.
followers. And on the paid side, it's expensive really fast for small brands. So yeah, there's definitely something that there's got to be a key to unlock a little like more value out of that
Mm,
somewhere, you know?
mm. I always challenged. I really don't like social media. I'm not active on anywhere other than,
Yeah.
I was in LinkedIn a couple of years ago. I've started again in November, and we've got some good leads come through LinkedIn since I've been active again
Yeah.
in November, which is great. But it's one of those things I find it quite cumbersome. We're in a very, very tight niche. It's a
Yeah.
very specific thing that we do with the specific problems that we solve. You try and post
Yeah.
regularly. It's almost feels like you're saying the same thing over. You just got to find different ways to say the same thing over and over again. It's
Right.
like, man, I don't know whether really there's, I want to be delivering value. If I'm going to do a post, well, I don't. It's not. It's not
Right.
just about selling what we do. It's actually saying, "Hey, look, here's a lesson here. This is one thing we saw, we found. You should do the same
Mm.
thing." But I've sort of struggled to,
Those
not struggled.
video Oh, sorry, those video posts, I've been seeing, like, a lot of friends of mine, especially in sales, they do those shorter video posts and everything. Those are engaging and those are really interesting because the thing is now with social media, you can't just get everyone in your company to like the post. That actually cares more if you share it and
That's
comments.
right.
Comments are really
That's
big.
right.
So it's also kind of like, how do you galvanize the team to then be like, guys, don't just like the post. You need to go on LinkedIn, share it, but then also put a comment and tag your friend, like get other people to comment
Yeah.
on it,
Yeah.
And so we have to figure out ways to make the content more engaging that way so it feels natural for people to do
Yeah.
that. But that's really the strongest indicator now is more the commenting,
Yeah. And
right?
shareable. Is it shareable? Is it interesting enough that somebody would want to share with their friends or peers or colleagues?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Uh,
Yeah.
So then, what are you experiencing from an organic and advertising perspective? There's been a lot of news lately about what happened with HubSpot, and there's also been a lot of speculation about what happened with HubSpot's blog, how they have
Mhm.
lost a massive amount of traffic, search engines, Google in particular, changing algorithms all the time. Have you noticed anything or
All the
had any
time. Yeah.
impact in the last 12 months with the organizations you're working with?
Yeah, that's interesting. Not quite so much, but it seems so far. I've seen actually I was just looking at the Google Analytics of a client short while ago. It seemed more cyclical. So it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. I haven't really dug into it yet. I literally just got access today. And then before that, I haven't been looking at a lot of the Google Analytics of a lot of clients. I haven't been in there quite as much. I've been looking more on the sort of CRM
Hmm.
side. Um, so I haven't seen huge impacts on companies, but it really kind of depends on how they're set up, right? Because like Google is constantly changing their algorithms because of like the way people are searching and whatnot. And so it's like if your website is really built like 5 years ago, like if it still has that same structure and you're still building the same type of content you did 5, 10 years ago, then obviously that you're going to get really hit by that. Yeah. Have you been seeing that with your clients or?
No, I haven't actually, and that's why I asked the question. It was very interesting. We
Yeah.
have the same cyclical nature. We have some clients that spike through the holiday period. We have others that are quieter through the holiday
Yeah,
period.
exactly.
But the cycle doesn't really seem to have changed over the last 3 years or so. So I was
Mhm.
but there's been we mentioned AI again. You're talking about the increase or
Yeah.
bigger impact on AI on the Google searches, and that there's
Yeah.
a lot less actual landscape or organic landscape on the front page of Google these days. There's AI suggestions coming up there, but yeah, I'm not seeing a
Yeah.
huge impact in traffic across our clients. Um, So to that end,
Mm.
we talked about, organic and advertising and LinkedIn or socials. How do you balance long-term brand building efforts
Mhm.
with, the short-term pipeline goals?
Yes. Yeah, that's always a tricky one because it's always like do you execute tactically or wait until you have a fully baked strategy? And it always feels like when you're at a smaller company or, fast growing company that you're sort of like building the car while you're driving it, which is a bit terrifying. So and so I definitely parallel path things. So when I arrive at a company, I pretty much have the two paths. One is I'm taking the first 2 or 3 weeks to figure out the strategy, put something together. Like we need some sort of path forward. Usually at that point, for a marketer, when you're getting into a full time job, at least you've probably done some sort of marketing presentation that is likely going to be 60% of your strategy when you walk into the role. So you already got some of that work done. As a consultant, I usually start with a strategy. That'll kind of be the first thing before I kind of get into either a more fractional role or sort of deeper
Yep.
work. But either way, if I'm coming in and it's like you have all of this to do and balance those two things. So the way I do that is I really, really focus razor sharp on the low hanging fruit and just the biggest problems that would make the most material impact on the business if they're fixed
Hmm.
tomorrow. And so it's like, okay, I'm writing my strategy at night by candlelight, but then during the day, it's just like, okay, this stuff needs to be in place now because this is or just turn this
Yep.
on. Like sometimes there have been things like I saw where I was like, why isn't the nurture running? I don't know. I mean, it's set up in HubSpot. Oh, I guess it is. Like, let's put it out
Yeah.
there. Let's upload the lesson. Let's start nurturing our lead. Like sometimes it's things that are that simple. Sometimes it's not, but it's really that
Yep.
triage. At the end of the day, you're really triaging the low hanging fruit, lowest effort, highest impact, and chipping away at all the high impact ones, like in that order as you're doing
Nice.
that. And then with the strategy, making sure that as you're already kind of buttoning it up, you're already thinking about those campaigns you need to launch. Like we know there are going to be campaigns. There are people in the business, hopefully, unless you're the first person there, you're being hired in. There's some events that they've already invested in that you are going to. Gee, then that's probably the campaign you should probably be structuring if you're going to I don't know, fintech event because that's one of your target
Yes.
verticals. You probably need a
Yeah.
campaign to
To
support
make sure
that
you
with some
you
other
you
channels around that.
maximize your ROI on those
You know,
existing events. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. It's like you're going there. Okay, you guys spent $20,000 on a booth. I guess this is clearly an important vertical. So there's a lot of kind of obvious things that people will miss because they'll try and reinvent the wheel, but you don't have time for that. Like reinvent the wheel when you got the time and you got the people in place. But so that's how I don't know if that answers the question, but it's really kind of the
Perfect.
triage on the low hanging fruit with the highest impact and really being razor focused on that, being like, that is what I'm fixing this week are these three things, and they're just getting done with the strategy happening alongside of it, but and then being mindful of the strategy. If you've already got certain events and not just a physical event, but other events that you've already invested in and that the team is doing, like, why not just align the rest, like your first campaigns around that? Like no reason to be focusing on all these other verticals and overworking yourself, right? Because the execution is like the devils are in the details for
Mm,
execution.
mm.
So
And that
yeah.
is that the type of organization that you're usually involved with, that there is already a marketing play in place?
Oh, no, not necessarily. One of the last companies I was at, they hadn't even launched out of stealth mode. So I walked in, they had a designer, but they didn't have like a proper marketer. So that was interesting because I had 7 weeks to design the brand, the visual identity, all the messaging and positioning, write the website, and get it all stood up and out in the press and everything in those 7 weeks. So it was a really, really fast project. So yeah, that was pretty clear.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't really a marketing strategy behind that. It was like, we have to hit the state and get this up. So that was very obvious. But because that was the short term triage, I had to, during that time, start planning for what happens after that. Like what's the strategy through the end of the year? And so that, so it was the same thing was happening there. Flow Commerce, I mentioned before, we had a great exit. there was really no marketing in place. I arrived, they had put up a couple of pages on the website, nothing real. They had an agency they were working with that just literally launched the blog the week before I arrived. They said, we got excited. We wanted to get it up before you got here. I was like, okay, well, I guess that's fine, but sure, you could have waited a week, but that's all good. And so, yeah, at that point, in those cases, you'd be surprised. There's less to fix, like, there's less stuff that's broken if it hasn't been put in place yet, but there's a lot of stuff that you need to do to kinda lay the foundation to be like, "Oh, again, a data problem," for example. "We have to make sure that this is happening so that then I can segment my list to be able to then do X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z." So, it's like, usually it happens either if there is a marketing team or there is no marketing team, like, it's all the same. You're gonna find, like, that the pattern is similar and in the plan of attack.
Yeah. I'm curious, what was it that made, what was there a catalyst or an event where you shifted from full-time to fractional and you started to help multiple organizations as opposed to one at a time?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the exit was 3 years ago now, and I'll be honest, it was one of those days I wanted to stay forever. I was so happy there. We were a family. I mean, I also arrived really early, post Series A, super small team. And there's a group of us, a core from the beginning that were and still are very close. And so, it was a really fun time when you sort of feel like you're building it with, a little group of friends or family kind of thing. And after that, I went out and sort of tried to find the next big thing, like kind of do the same thing again, join a post Series A company. And I don't know, I didn't quite. I looked around. I worked at a couple of places, and they were great experiences, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for, and so I didn't know, is it the right vertical for me, or is it the size of the company? And so I decided to take a step back because I never actually did after the acquisition. I just kind of jumped in. I was like, oh, I'll go work at this company. It looks kind of cool. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure if that's quite right on both sides. And then another company, and where I launched them out of stealth, and I loved that, and it was good. But then it was a very different kind of market. Things changed, and so I was thinking, well, maybe this is not quite it. And so now I took a few months to really think about what I wanted to do, and I explored everything. You'd be surprised, like the types of companies I was talking to and colleagues and stuff. Um, and when it came down to it, I really realized I kind of like being like a Mary Poppins. I like coming in and putting things in place and building. I call myself a builder and an architect and a builder. So I like to architect and get those things there. It's not that I don't like to grow and farm and nurture. It's just that I'm stronger in the kind of crisis
Mhm,
mode.
mhm.
Okay, how do we get this off the ground? Or I come in and fix things that are broken, where it's just like, okay, we kind of have to scrap it and start from scratch, or we've got to, like, build it back up. Um, so that's kind of where I thrive. And because of that, I felt, consulting could be really good because then I can come in and do these types of engagements, and focus on those areas and then help them bring in that CMO that can, or the VP of marketing that can do that growth piece there. Like, now I can hand them the keys and they're like, okay, I got it from here, sort of thing. I think that they are different skill sets. And I found that the parts of my job as a head of marketing full time that I really enjoyed was the building and the
Mhm.
architecting. And then the sort of nurturing and growing was a bit less. It wasn't as exciting to me. It was just kind of like, oh, I'm used to this. This is fun. I like my team. I like the people I work with. But it wasn't, somehow it didn't drive me quite as hard, or as much.
It
Yeah.
it it really brings a question to my mind that I think that, that architect and that building side, there's so many skills and capability that's required there, and a very different type of skill set than the nurturing and
Yeah.
ongoing management. I wonder, with AI and automation changing the game, how do you see
Mhm.
the role of that, nurturing marketer, the in business marketer evolving over the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh, so AI specifically for the more farmer, like the nurture one. Wow, I think that they are going to benefit enormously. I think they already are. The more AI tools, like, especially imagine being someone who walks into a role and you already have all these AI tools talking to each other. Like, that's amazing. You've got a lot of, yeah, there's a lot you can do with that. Um, I think for them, it's definitely there's going to be some different challenges for sure. I think that, the structure of marketing teams is going to change, not because like AI is going to replace people, but people are going to need to have different skill
Yep.
sets, obviously, to deal with AI and understand how AI works, like a deeper understanding. I think marketers are going to become super like if they're good marketers, they're going to be super experts at understanding the ins and outs of
Yep.
AI, I think, as a
Yep.
function. And so I'm really interested to see how that evolves in marketing. But yeah, I mean, they're going to benefit enormously from that, like having systems that talk to each other better and learn and together and that can play nicely and play better continuously together to be able to nurture that and help with cost savings, like all the stuff that happens to a marketer after they've been around for a while and they're growing. It's like, okay, now we're cutting your budget in half. You have to do the same thing you did last year, but with less budget. It's like, okay, that's actually more possible with AI tools at your
Yep.
disposal, right? So yeah, I think that'll be there's gonna be a lot of interesting things there to
I
see.
look, I agree with you. I think that look, there will be some marketers that if you don't adopt, you'll die. I mean, there will be the ones that you
Yeah.
really are. There's going to be a time of change, that's for sure. And as they say, it's the adaptable in the species that survive. And I think that's very much case for marketers and marketing teams moving forward. And the same with the next levels underneath the marketing leadership team. I can see a
Yeah.
lot more being able to be done with a lot less, and so there'll probably be, as you've said, less. Um, there'll be a much more reliance on AI skill sets and people understanding
Yeah.
the ins and outs of AI and how to leverage that. Because I think, AI, you're not talking, I even know in our business, you're not talking 1x, 2x, you're talking 10x, 20x, when it comes to AI
Yeah.
and outputs and things that it can do for you, particularly around, I think,
That's right.
um, analysis and taking a step back to be able to look at a huge data set and then start to draw some conclusions and
Yes.
take you down paths. I mean, that for me is probably one of the biggest fascinations I have, that our clients are starting to use across massive, volumes of chats
Yeah.
transcripts instead of a person having to, these are the conversations
Mhm.
I'm having now. Here's the real insights that are coming, the top 10 questions that are being asked. Maybe we need to
Right.
adjust our website,
Right.
here's the top, here's,
Right. But for a marketer to understand how the AI is responding to that and looking at that data to then be able to adjust their query
correct.
to be even smarter and pull like kind of even more out of that, like an understanding how it's trained or how it's learning, that those things like yeah, that'll be so important. I think marketers will pick up on it
Yeah,
quickly. Like in general, marketers are good with like new tools. They tend to be early
absolutely.
adopters, especially online.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, are there any emerging tools or platforms that you're excited about right now? Anything that you've seen?
Ooh. Oh man, you're asking me a question. I got off a call with a digital agency a short while ago, and I'm blanking on the name, but they were telling me about this new digital platform that is really cool. I'm trying to see if I can find it, but I have it open on one of my millions of tabs here. But because we're looking to hire this agency to help us with digital media, one of the companies I'm consulting for, paid media, which was the whole conversation of like, how do we make social better? How do we make this work? Like, ads, they're
Yep.
exhausting. Like, what can we do in paid media? And so apparently, like this tool he was saying that, they had been using had been showing really strong results and the types of ads that they were showing. So I was starting to dig into that before this call. So I apologize, I don't remember the name. But that is an area that I am looking for tools in is like how do you make paid media better, like better bang for your buck, more cost effective, like just get people to respond to it? Like, is it dead? Is it going to be dead? Like, is PPC going to matter? I mean, especially with the AI bot at the top, the AI descriptions and everything, those are actually very
Yep.
useful. Um, so yeah. So looking for tools in that area is really interesting. Yeah. But
It's brilliant so
yeah.
much. I think that one of the things that I do with these podcasts is break them down into snippets. And there's so much of what you're saying that my
Mm.
mind's starting to spin and going, wow, these are just going to be amazing little snippets. I'll share them all.
Oh,
I'll share
good.
them all with you. We
Okay.
produce them out of the platform
Oh,
so you
great.
can, if you want to use them in your own socials or whatever, that'd be, yeah,
Oh, that'd be
I'll share them
great.
through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in fact, getting back onto it. So we were talking about tools, right? One of the tools that, one of the greatest AI tools that I use is actually the platform that we use for this podcast. I mention it nearly every podcast because it's used,
That's
it generally comes
Squadcast.
up. Squadcast is now owned by Descript, and I use
Okay.
Descript. It automatically loads from this recording up into Descript, and Descript allows you to edit the podcast. It uses AI to take out things like spaces and ums and ahs and so forth. It
Mhm.
uses AI to go through and break snippets out of the podcast. So I can say, give me 50 snippets of key moments, and it will go through, 1 minute long, 30
Mhm.
seconds long, 2 minutes long. You designate all of that and it does it automatically for you. But the really fascinating thing I
Mm.
like, I've never really enjoyed, and I'm at the stage now with this podcast. We've launched our 10th episode, published our 10th episode. We've got another 6 or so in the can. I'm almost getting to the stage where I'm ready to hand it over, but I do everything post ourselves at the moment. I'm one of those people that likes to fully understand the process before I hand it over to somebody else so I know what's involved in the job. And with Descript, you're
Mm.
actually able to edit in the transcript itself. You don't need to go down into the bars underneath the timeline. You can change words and
Mm.
it'll AI word voice you change over and all that sort of stuff. It's quite fascinating. So it's a pretty, it's probably, so literally it takes me 30 minutes post-production on a podcast.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's
That's right.
fantastic.
Then that's
Yeah.
why I'm at a stage where it's like, okay, I'm enjoying it. I'm the one that's had the conversation. I know the interesting parts. Do I really want to hand this over to somebody else at this stage? So I will in the next couple of weeks, but at this stage, yeah, I'm at that. It's such a small effort after the recording that it seems to make sense just to finish it and it's all done. So
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, things like that. I mean, it's all about process and efficiency, right? Not all about that only, but I mean, that's a huge saving of time and cost and all those good things. And that's the thing, like being able to produce more with less is really the goal with tech at the end of the day.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
um,
Do
yeah, that's
do you
great.
think that you would start again in a full-time role if there was another one, another opportunity like an early stage, or at whatever stage it is, but it's something that looks like you could jump
Mm.
into and then grow with. Would you do it for what circumstance would you do it? Would you do it with a view to an exit, or would you do it to
Yeah.
somewhere to sit in with for a little while? Or
I would only do it if it was kind of similar to my experience at Flow. Like, let's do this. I want to do it again. I want to do it bigger this time, maybe. Or kind of a similar thing. Cause it was, and I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of chasing the past or something, one of those people that just lives in the past. But it was really exciting and it never felt stayed or dull because we were constantly shifting. It was like, okay, now we're shifting to enterprise. Okay, now we're going after this competitor, and their clients, or now we're going to kind of take a different approach to, whatever this is, or like the type of offering we had. We were building out like a partnership area, like really important partnership relationships that required a lot of marketing support. I had full access to all the clients. And so I had a lot of clients I was talking to. So I was doing some really interesting things there with them. So I had a lot of opportunity to get into a lot of areas, which is why I like being at earlier stage. The challenge is finding those early stage companies that has what it takes to get there, because it doesn't matter what your marketer or your CEO or just one person can do. It's really about the whole
yeah,
team,
yeah,
right? So if you don't have, and that's really hard. You can't predict that, and also market conditions can shift. I mean, there's so many things that could happen, which is why such a small percent of companies post Series A actually make it past that,
mm,
right? So I would want, actually, one of the the reasons I like consulting for now, because I just started like just 4
yeah.
months ago. So I'm still pretty new to this, which is fun. I've had several clients, and it's been super interesting. I kind of like the idea of dating before you get married, where like maybe I'll find a company like that and we'll start with something where, honestly, I've already talked to a couple of companies. I'm just doing projects. There's nothing about full-time jobs or anything. But it's like we can't get a marketing person. We have an assistant on the team. They're really hungry. They want to learn marketing, but they can't put together a strategy. We need someone to just kind of tell us what to do, and then we'll we'll
Go and
we'll put that
execute.
person to
Yeah,
work and they'll execute. Yeah. And then, if that goes well in the future, stay on as an advisor. And then if it turns into like, look, we're about to get our Series A and we want to bring you in, like if I'm having a good time, absolutely I'd consider going back full time. That would be great. But I want to be really
Yeah.
cautious. Like I want to be really smart about it. And I want to make sure at this point when you're in a senior level, it's so much about fit at this point. You're not just going into a job to learn a skill set, and the company's not just hiring you to like grow a future leader. Like you are going in because it's like a marriage. Like you are all in, they are all in, and it's got to work. And you just don't know until you're in the position. And if it doesn't work out, you'll find out pretty quickly, but it's just kind of frustrating. It's frustrating on both sides. So, um, and there's a lot of turnover, as you know, in sales and marketing
Yeah.
as it is. Like people tend to move around a lot and it is tiring. So I don't want to continue doing that. I want to be somewhere and stay. So, hopefully I'll find a client that, we kind of fall in love and have that whole rom-com happy ending and it'll work out,
Sounds
right?
good. No, I love that approach. I think it's great
Yeah.
that dating before you get married. And look, it's a really good way to do it because you do get to feel it from the inside. If you're going through that process to
Yeah.
find an organization to work, if it's a normal recruitment process, I know at executive level it is quite an extended process, but still, until you're actually in there, even at an executive with the
Yeah.
extended process, you never really know. And
That's
from both
right.
sides, the organisation never really knows whether you're going to be a good fit until
They
you're in and
never know.
operating. Yeah, yeah. So it's good. It's good that you're able to get in
Yeah.
and get that experience. Look,
Yeah.
you've worked with some
And
amazing teams and some amazing brands. What's one leadership lesson that stuck with you throughout your career?
hmm. Oh wow. Leadership lesson. Um, wow, I'm trying to think back. I had such a great team at Flow and I'm trying to think like what made it work so well or what did I do right? Or maybe it was just them. They were so fantastic they didn't even need me. Um, but a leadership lesson, I actually on that topic of um, fit and everything. I had a boss at one of the companies I was at, and she's still a close friend. She's so fantastic. And we had the type of incredibly mature conversation where we sat down, like it was one day we were like, can we go for coffee? And we sat down and it was like, look, I don't think I'm right for this role. And she was like, I want you to be, but I feel like you need to do things that you might not that you're not as interested in. And I don't know, and I need that performance to be like that, but you're better in this area here, but there isn't a role in that area. And I was like, completely agree. And it was a fantastic parting. We're still close friends so that we celebrate our birthdays together because they're 3 days
Okay.
apart. And it was just so mature because we both saw it. So she was like, look, let's do 3 months. You've got things that you're managing and people you're managing. Let's keep that. But here are like three big projects I just need buttoned up and like and then and in that time, you'll kind of, we'll make sure, we'll part paths and it'll look all very much like an
Yeah.
organic, natural
Of course.
thing, and it was great. It was perfect. And it worked out so well. And I never thought of that before as a type A personality, which I think a lot of leaders are. You think like, I can make this work. Like I'm going to make this work. Like, of course I can do this job. Of course, it doesn't matter if don't have the skill set or if doesn't come naturally to me. I can do this. And sometimes you forget like relationships are 50-50. And that was what she said at the end of the day. She was like, you got to meet, like we have to meet halfway, and it's hard when it's not, we can't come together, it's both
Yep.
of us. It's not just you. A relationship is never one
Yep.
sided,
Yep.
right? So that was a really big leadership lesson. And so whenever I do part paths with an employee, I always think about that, where it's like, keep in mind, it's not about you being a bad employee. It's just about this place not being right for you as well. Like it's a fit thing. So, um, and that's really important because it's a better message, but it's also
Yep.
true. If you were if you were perfect for them, you would have helped them learn that job. You would have helped them be successful, and grow into it or inspire them to, so I think employers sometimes forget that, I
Yeah.
think. And so I think that's important for that empathy and compassion piece. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. I
Mhm.
love that. I think that's probably, I mean, look, I've been in the unfortunate situation in my prior corporate career of managing acquisitions and integrations, which inevitably means downsizing. When there's two businesses come together, generally there's you've got to get the synergies of the acquisition that's been signed off by the board, and that usually means cost
Yeah.
reductions are part of that. And I was
Mhm.
actually in a conversation earlier today. We were talking about the challenge and struggle of actually exiting people from a business, and I think I've had the unpleasant experience of doing that over 1,500 times, and like one-on-one
Ugh.
conversations, and it's really been
Yeah.
what you've
Ugh.
just described is the
Yeah.
almost the epitome of how I've approached things. And I think I've never really thought to that level as either, but it really is a case. It's not you as an individual. It's not you that's caused this. It's not, it's
Yeah.
the circumstances that have arrived at this particular point in time. And I found that in many of the cases, the conversations we've had, I mean, it's always difficult, but many of those conversations have actually turned out to be some relief. Because they weren't necessarily happy there anyway. I mean, there's a reason you end up on the bottom of lists like that. There's a level of
Yes.
performance that's not there that should be. And
I've had that where the girl was like, the direct report was like, "Oh God, this is kind of a relief," because like I was just trying to make it work, and I was never gonna have the guts to say that like I felt like it wasn't working,
yeah,
and then I was like, "Oh, thank God, okay," because like it's always harder on the person who's exiting,
of course.
obviously, but it's always you want to make sure as an employer that they understand that it's not like they're not being sent away from the party. It's like, it's just time for us to part
Yeah,
paths,
yeah.
So that I'm sorry you've had to do that
N-
so many
Look,
times, but
the good
yeah.
side of it is that I've always been lucky enough or strategic enough to be in organisations with very high integrity, so that when those conversations took place, the exit process was very formalised. It was extended. It was, there was an enormous level of empathy there. There was time frames and remuneration, etc., and
Yeah,
outplacement
of
programs
course.
and all of those sort of things that go along with it. So it's not just
Mm.
you know cut and dry, you're out the door, see you later type thing. So, I guess there was that one on the downside, but nevertheless, I mean, those difficult conversations, whether it's an exit from a business or even performance management, sometimes when someone's
Yeah,
doing the
yeah,
right thing and you need to adjust their behavior, they're the
yeah,
conversations where, it's around outcomes, not necessarily who they are as individuals. So as long as their heart's in the right place,
right. Exactly, exactly. And compassion at the end of the
Yeah,
day. Like these are people,
yeah, exactly,
so
exactly.
it's like,
If you
yeah.
could go back and give your younger self, and let's put a time frame on this, let's say late teens, early 20s, if you could give yourself one
Ooh.
piece of advice, what would it be?
Wow, one piece of advice if I could go back in time. Well, I'd love to say like you're going to be just fine. Don't stress so much. Um but yeah, I mean there is something about like, when you're young and you're like what's going to happen to me in the future? Where am I going to end up? I mean, I studied art history and I ended up in
Wow.
marketing for tech.
Wow.
I mean, I never would have imagined that I would own my own LLC. I mean, that was never something I expected to do. So, I think sort of maybe telling myself and reassuring myself back then, like things are not going to happen the way you plan. So it's okay. It's great to have a plan, but just be ready for everything to change. And that's totally
Yeah.
fine. And that's part of the growth is just be okay with that. I'm very much a planner. I think that's what makes like a good marketer is being very organized and planning. And so just all these twists and turns in my career, it would have been, there was a lot of, wow, what am I doing? What is going on? Like, am I right? Like, should I be here? Should I go somewhere else? Like, how did I end up here? So I think it's just the kind of like, just go with it. A lot of change is going to happen and just, embrace it and move forward because you're going to be just fine. So
And is
I
that the mindset
think
you
that's what I
operate?
would have told myself.
And is that the mindset you operate with now?
Oh, well, now, I mean, I made a huge shift from full-time work. So, I mean, at this point, I think I'm becoming like immune to, all this, the madness of change or every day, I tell my friends just like, oh, this happened today. Of course, because like, what's going to happen tomorrow? I have no idea. Like, do I have a client in 2 months? I don't know yet because I'm still figuring that out. Like, there's so much uncertainty
Yeah.
that like I kind of have to just embrace that at this point. And I don't have a
Yeah.
choice to, plan too much around it because otherwise I'm never going to sleep. So,
Oh, very good. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that I haven't asked about at this stage?
oh, um, I can't think of anything else. We touched on so much.
We did. We
I
did.
mean, I always love to learn from people like what demand gen, like really high performing, like targeted programs people are running. Cause it's like I have my playbook, which I mean, I don't like to say that because it makes it sound like very rigid, but I have a lot of these thoughts and ideas and things, but I know there's just blind spots. And that's one of the things that is a little challenging as like a sole marketer, both in-house at past companies, but then also as a consultant, is that you don't have as much of that, like working with a marketer and being like, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, wow. I wouldn't have thought of that, And so it's like, I'd be curious to hear from you how you get your information or stay kind of hooked in with other marketers to continue being
Look,
innovative.
excellent
Yeah.
question. We a little bit about our business. So we really don't do any marketing. We have
Mm,
done zero marketing virtually up until about November last year. And when I say
wow.
marketing, I mean in terms of doing anything outbound that's going to create some sort of demand. Our approach has been
Right.
cold calling and cold emailing. That's virtually how we've
Right.
grown the business. We're bootstrapped. We don't have any
Wow.
investment. We're all
Yeah.
totally self-funded. And our focus has been on let's do the things that generate sales immediately. Now, we've been doing
Yeah.
it for 10 years now. And in hindsight, I wish if I'd have told myself something 10 years ago, it would be start marketing straight away. Maybe we'd
Yeah.
be in a situation where there's inbound
Yeah.
demand and traffic by now. But look, it's probably not fair to say we never did. We dabbled around with SEO and a few other things, and my business partner's got expertise in those
Mm,
areas. But because of what we do, the keywords that
yeah.
we operate in, very expensive and highly searched, but
Yeah.
not necessarily, it's
I can
not staff
imagine.
live chat. Everyone's looking for live chat software and chatbots, not the staffing component. So we're very, very niche in what we do.
Right.
And so from our perspective, when I say marketing, we kicked off in November, started recording a podcast, which is this, and we've, 10 episodes published now
Mm,
this week. I've become more active on LinkedIn, and in fact, since Christmas, virtually posting 4,
mm,
5, 6 times a week on LinkedIn. Up
right.
until Christmas, that got us some good leads. I haven't had any since then, but it's only sort of just into February. Um, we
Hmm.
haven't really gone through that whole, okay, let's put a strategy together, the brand, the messaging, and all that sort of thing. We've sort of learnt on the
Right.
run from the cold
Right.
calls and the emails that we've been doing. So one thing I
Right.
have done is started to join a few marketing communities. So
Mm, yeah.
marketing, and I think probably the one that's standing out for me the most at the moment is one that's run by Dave Gerhardt, and it's called Exit
Mm.
5. I'm actually finding, I've shared
Okay. I'm not familiar with that one.
stuff
Yeah.
in there, and I've asked some questions, and the insights and
Mm.
and and helpfulness of that community is just amazing.
Oh,
I
that's
put our
great.
website up there and said, look, we've just revised this, can I get some feedback? And it was like, I think I got
Yeah.
20 responses, and, everyone was
Wow, that's
almost
great.
concurring and saying, I agree with that. Do this as well. Do this as well. So we're going through a big whole, website rebuild in the back end now, in the background. And
Right.
I'll put through, look and say, here's our staging copy, taking all your feedback into consideration. Where do we go from there? So it's like,
Right.
I found that to be super, super useful. I've only been in it probably about 8 weeks now. But yeah, met some good people and got some great advice. So I think, this whole
That's great.
the
Yeah.
network and peer communities are where I'm finding that you can get some good insights and stuff to that.
Right.
Look, I've got to say,
I'm still trying to oh,
I was just
sorry.
going to say, having conversations like this, I've learned so much on the podcast.
Yeah.
We've interviewed some CMOs and some fractional people and sales leaders. It's been the
Mhm.
insights that have been on there have been incredible as well. So it's yeah,
Right.
it's I think that for me it's really rubbing shoulders with people that are doing that type of work has made the biggest difference, and that's what's changed probably since November.
Yeah. No, that's really good. One of the things I'm hoping to find at some point, like I have my AI newsletters and I have like kind of general industry news newsletters or things like that. But I'm kind of like hoping at some point I can find like that really smart, curated, like marketer, like B2B marketer kind of newsletter. I'm sure it's out there where it's like a section that says like the new tools you need to try. Here's like, a code to get a free 3 month, whatever, or free month, like here, and like be like, here's kind of the biggest trends like from this person, or here's the 3 podcasts you need to listen to this specific one. It's like, I'm not going to listen to this podcast every week
Yeah.
'cause I got a million things
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But if there's like a specific one that you're like, if you're interested in this type of thing, like, I don't know, I'm sure they're out there, those newsletters. It's just I haven't found the right one
Yeah.
yet. And so I'm on like the hunt for that one that I can read every morning really quickly, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah. Otherwise it's just kind of like this, like conversations casually with people, or at work, someone mentions, oh, we're using this tool at this company. And I'm like, oh, I haven't heard of that tool. Let me check it out. That seems
Mm,
interesting,
mm, mm, mm.
So yeah.
I would love to, the tool you mentioned earlier about the AI tool for advertising.
Yeah, I don't know that it's AI powered necessarily. That's kind of what I'm hoping I'll find in the future. I'll let you know. I'll look for the name of the company, but I know that they are doing something different in paid media. And that it's just like a different approach. I just can't remember what it was. Like I apologize. I have to look it up
Yeah, no,
now.
that's okay.
But I'll let you know what the name of that company was. I'll send you a
That'd be
note.
great. That'd be great. Now, I guess, look, the
Yeah.
big question is, where can our listeners follow your work, or connect with you, get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn,
We'll put the
and so
links on
that's
for
probably
your
the best way.
website.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah, that's the best place to follow me. I'm not as active on Instagram anymore, but I do love Instagram as well, and it's the same username.
Okay. Okay. Oh, very
So,
good. Well, we'll put all those links on underneath there. Look, I've got to say, thank you. It's been a sensational conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about, or any other questions you had for me?
no, this has been great. I really appreciate the conversation and great questions as well. Really had got me thinking there. So that was great. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Juliana Pereira, thank you very much for coming on the chat, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Terry. It's good to see you.